Welcome to My Healing is Your Healing, a podcast for the woman who is ready to stop performing and reclaim her voice. I'm your host, Celeste, and around here, we don't do surface level. We go deep. Each week, we'll explore concepts like self-discovery, radical honesty, and the kind of healing that rewrites your story from the inside out. This is a space for truth-telling, for remembering who you are, and for coming home to yourself, louder, braver, and more radiant than ever. So come as you are, and let's do this together. Let's begin. Welcome back to My Healing is Your Healing. I am your host, Celeste, and today's conversation is for anyone who has ever had to grieve the version of themselves they always thought that they would be, and then figure out who they are when life says, nope, not that way. There are moments in life when the road that you're confidently driving on disappears without a warning. Not just a gentle curve, not a scenic detour, but a full skid, a hard stop. And suddenly, the life that once defined you, those roles, the routines, the dreams that you were racing towards, are no longer available. And I know this place intimately because for me, it looked like waking up one day and realizing that my body, my relationships, my future narrative, all of the things that I thought would move forward in some kind of predictable way, had quietly pulled over onto the side of the road. And I remember thinking, okay, if I'm not becoming who I plan to be, then who am I becoming now? And that question, it doesn't necessarily have a quick answer, but it has a very honest one. So today's conversation is about what happens after that full stop, when you're forced to downshift, sit in the grief, and slowly begin building a new road from the inside out. I am joined by Ryanne, author, speaker, publisher, lifelong car lover, and a woman whose story is shaped by resilience rather than speed. When debilitating symptoms and a Lyme disease diagnosis forced her to step away from the fast cars that she loved, Ryanne didn't just lose her hobby. She lost an identity. And in that grief, she found something unexpected. A deeper sense of self-worth, her voice, and purpose. Today, Ryanne races through motherhood, creativity, and life one corner at a time. She advocates for kindness, resilience, and becoming exactly who you're meant to be, not the one we once planned on becoming. There's a quote attributed to Mario Andretti that Ryanne loves. When life gives you a curve, downshift and take it aggressively. This conversation is about those curves, the ones that we never asked for, and how downshifting can become the very place that we reclaim our power. So let's dig in. Hey, Ryanne, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to dig in with you because you have quite an interesting story.
For sure.
So I'm going to jump right in because we've already talked about you before you hopped on here. So I want to talk about the fact that your life came to a sudden halt. Can you take us back to the moment of when you realized the version of your life that you had been driving towards was no longer possible?
I was literally on a racetrack. So my entire adult life, looking back, always had health issues. And it was, this just overwhelming fatigue and things that, okay, I'm being treated for thyroid. And so like that helps. And, okay, I can take the supplement and yeah, that helps. But it never really went away. So COVID hit and everybody is like, it's just chaos, right? We're all home. We're stuck at home, but it's still chaos. I'm home with my kids, not able to work. And I still even with the break, I'm still not feeling well. We catch COVID and it taking me a long time to recover, which we find out is a normal thing for a lot of people. For me, I ended up having really bad tremors in my hands. And I can't write. I'm dropping things. it's starting to get scary. And I am being sent for MRIs, diagnoses like Parkinson's are being thrown out, like really scary stuff. And I did what my doctor called at the time, which was kind of before people were doing this, a long haul COVID treatment. And it was a 2-week course of this med cocktail that made me feel miserable while I was on it for those 2 weeks. And then after those 2 weeks, the tremors went away. Okay, cool. We catch COVID again. And now after we recover from COVID, this is when I'm out on the racetrack and it is not going well. Like my brain is telling my body to do something and my body is not listening. Which when you're going over 100 miles an hour on a racetrack, like that's a problem. So I had to pull myself off the track. And it was kind of a devastating thing because this is a bucket list weekend for me and my husband. This is like a big deal. And I did 20 minutes on Saturday and lost the rest of my weekend. And, I'm back to having the tremors. I'm having cardiac issues. Like it was getting really scary. And so, call my doctor on Monday. Hey, this is what's going on. And he was like, wait a minute. I really think as long as I've been treating you, all of the pieces to the puzzle, I think this might be Lyme. And sure enough, get tested, nothing normal, from your doctor, blood work, but we have to send it off to a specialized lab in California. And it comes back like super positive. So going back to that 2-week course of meds, that cocktail, it was also a Lyme treatment. That's why I temporarily felt better. So here I am. I just had my 40th birthday, and a few days later, I receive a Lyme diagnosis, and they think that I've had it for over 20 years. And guess what? The treatment for Lyme, you feel way worse before you feel any better. So for me, I went from being an award-winning financial professional where people, respected me and looked up to me and all of this to I am overwhelmed by everything. My, senses are like hyper aware of everything. I have to shut myself in a room. I can't be around my family. I can't handle watching TV. And so I'm reading voraciously. It's the only thing I can do. And the more I read, the more ideas started coming until it became, I'm the car girl who got too sick to drive the fun cars. So I wrote about them instead. And you can kind of see in the background, I have my little children's books back there. I just released my 3rd book. And it's been an absolutely wild journey. And I'm here to say I am so grateful. I know it sounds weird. I'm grateful for COVID. I'm grateful that it amplified my symptoms so that I could finally get a diagnosis. I'm grateful that the treatment for it sucked because it took me in this direction that I never would have gone through on my own. And I know it's a weird thing to be thankful for, but I really, truly am.
I love this story. There's like so many dynamics to it too, which makes me happy. So thank you for sharing that, like the whole thing. Cause when I read what you sent to me earlier, I was like, okay, this is going to be fun to work with, but there's so much more depth to it.
There really is. All of the things.
So, my first initial thought is, do you believe in the universe? Are you spiritual? Or is there like a higher power, or do you feel like things lead you in some kind of direction?
I definitely, so I believe in God. I struggle a little bit on the organized religion part because I'm not good with rules, but I definitely feel like, we make our own choices, but we are guided a certain direction. That our choices that we make bring us to a certain place. And I absolutely 100% feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be now.
I love that. Okay, so I'm very curious before that, before the point where you started getting sick and before COVID, and I'll kind of explain this in a second, but what was it that your life was like? And maybe do you notice that there were potentially signs that you were burning out or something else that might have led you to that place?
So I was definitely going in that direction. I loved my job. My company was an amazing company, but I didn't feel like, well, I felt like I had maxed out where I was, and there wasn't really anywhere for me else to go within my company. So I was already starting to question, what am I doing with my life? What can I do with my life? I think I'm meant for more, all of this. And, was struggling with that. Um, I had just started going back to work, actually, after being home with my kids for a while. And I'm there and I'm back and I'm like, I'm not feeling great. My mind isn't as sharp as it had been. Um, my heart wasn't in it as much. And knowing now, hindsight's 2020, right? Knowing now that I needed to transition and I was just ignoring those signs. Um, I really feel like the universe and my body just said, okay, here's the shove you need to get you there. And then I finally listened.
I mean, this even ties the story in so much better because like it was telling you something beforehand and you weren't listening and the universe is like, no, hear me out. And you're like, but wait, let me just try to force this and function. And it's like, nope, we're going to set you on your butt.
Yep. Absolutely. 100%.
I love stories like these because it just makes me recognize how special life is.
It's so hard because there's so much darkness surrounding a chronic illness diagnosis and the feelings of inadequacy and brokenness and, feeling like you're a burden to your family and to everyone around you. But at the same time, like it really was such a gift. And I feel like, I have to see that part of it too, because it really is.
Yeah, it's like a blessing in disguise almost.
For sure.
Yeah. I had a hysterectomy in October and it had like probably 10 years worth of just junk before it that was just making my life hell.
Yeah.
Whether it was like going out for a run and not knowing if my shorts were going to be the same color when I came back, even when I wasn't on my period, right? Or like not being able to be physical with a partner because I was just constantly in the state where I like didn't know what it was going to look like, right? And so now, like I'm 2 months post surgery, and like things are very slow. But I'm also just like, this is just a brand new life. And I am so excited to see what happens because I don't have to worry about any of it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and what I had said when I went on mute was, how do you explain that to a partner? Like, I don't know what's going on with my body. I don't know what to expect. Like, so you should just be aware of, it could be a nightmare. Like, how do you have that conversation?
Oh my gosh, it's awkward, right? And before this whole journey that I was on for the past 2 years since I walked away from the altar, um, I'm like, how do I want to live my life, right? And like for the longest time, I was a people pleaser. And so I would do whatever you wanted me to do. I would be whoever you wanted me to be. And I didn't want to make it awkward. And so I didn't ever talk about sex and heaven forbid talk about like all of the weird stuff that comes out of you. And like, you know, plus they're guys. They're like,
That's a little gross. Yeah. But yeah. And so you're like, you either just don't have the conversation about it and it gets really awkward, or you just don't have that side of your relationship. And so I'm really looking forward to being able to have the weird conversations with people, whether it's about how your body feels or how unsexy you feel on a given day. And just, yeah. Yeah. And it's so strange. It's like when you're going through it and there's so many unknowns, it's it's harder to have those conversations. When you stop fighting an invisible enemy, you know what you're dealing with. And then it's like, oh, I got this. Like, have all the hard conversations. Let's do it. Exactly. Because you felt like it defined you and you're like, well, this is just wrong with me. Yeah. And now you recognize that you're not the Lyme disease, right? Or you're not the, what do you call it? Excess bleeding, right? Or like unknown XYZ. You are Celeste or Ryanne and we're humans and we're not this. It's 100%. Yeah. But that's also like the interesting thing too that I like to bring up with people is that um we are this like consciousness and we're just kind of given this, I call it a meat sack. Um when it's just like, it's not necessarily luck of the draw, but like you are just, this is the facilitator for you to function in your life. And so you can't really control and say, well, I have this disease. Like it just kind of happened to the body that you wound up in. Yes. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And so the person that you are and everything that comes with it shouldn't have to be inhibited by, what you're carrying around. Your meat sack. Thank you. I love it. Okay. So jumping ahead here, you've spoken about grieving the wife, the mom, the woman that you thought you would be. Yeah. What surprised you most about that grief? That most people don't talk about it. Oh. That most of us don't realize that we need to grieve that. And allow yourself to. Exactly. Exactly. So I think for me, I mean, there's always people who want to say, you're so strong. I can't believe everything that you're going through. And it's like, I appreciate the sentiment, but at the same time, like, I don't want to be strong anymore. This shit sucks, you know? And so if you're being this strong person and putting on that face for people, how do you grieve? That's a good question. So I think, like you said, allowing yourself to have those feelings and to work through them, because you're never going to be that woman you thought you were going to be. You're not going to be that mom you wanted to be. You're not the wife that you were hoping to be when you set those vows. Mm-hmm. And that's, to me, it felt like huge failures. And I had to really work through that. It wasn't failure. It was just a different path, a different road. I like how you're saying that. And what we don't recognize as humans is that we evolve. And so when life changes, we also have to course correct. But we don't want to, because we want to be that like picture in our head and we want to finish the story. We want to let it play out. We don't want to listen to all the signs that say change needs to happen. We want to ignore them. But I think the most fun thing that I've learned over the past 2 years is that when you just kind of surrender a little bit more and you allow yourself to like flow, Like the river, instead of just being a stick in the mud and trying to manhandle the steering wheel, if you will, for life, it becomes so much easier because then you're like, oh, okay, it's taking a turn. And you just kind of let it happen and you see what new course you're going on. So I'm gonna car girl geek out for a second here. I have a quote that I just like when I heard it, I was like, yes. So it's attributed to Mario Andretti. And the quote is, when life gives you a curve, downshift and take it aggressively. So when you downshift, you're coming back into your power, right? And when you're on a racetrack, you don't get surprised when you come to a curve. You just didn't get it. And so it was such a mind-blowing moment. It's like, oh, you dummies. Like, you go out and you track cars for fun on purpose, and you took this long to get the metaphor. But like you said, I mean, when the river is flowing, if you're going to be the stick in the mud, like you're making it so much harder. When you're on a racetrack, if you try to avoid the corner, you're never going to finish the race. Right. You're going to crash. Exactly. Or you're going to, yeah. I like that analogy a lot. Yeah. So then little car girl geek out, So when something central to your identity is taken away, like that was for you, your health, your body, your ability to do what it is that you love, how did you begin to rebuild a sense of yourself without trying to replace what was lost? So my characters in my children's books are based on, people in my life, cars in my life, because I believe that cars have personalities 100%. And so they're kind of this mashup, the car personality and the people personality. And it was kind of this very cathartic way to stay in the car world and then continue to be relevant in the car world, even though I couldn't be out on the track being a wild woman anymore. I still have the connection to it in the form of these books. And so, I do events like unfortunately got postponed because of the ice storm, but there was supposed to be an event this past weekend that's it's a drive for kids, and it's a charity car show at the local track where it's in support of child advocates and arms wide adoption. And I go out there and I sell books around all of these really beautiful cars. And I donate a part of the proceeds from all of the sales towards these charities. And so I still get to be a part of it. I miss the driving. When my husband's out there on the track, like I have my little boohoo moments, but I'm still there. Mm-hmm. I'm still relevant to it. And so that's how I stay, true to my car girl self. Even though I'm not able to actually track the cars anymore. I love that. Okay, so we talked a little bit about rock bottom already, but it has a way of amplifying your inner critic a lot, right? So what did that voice sound like for you after the aftermath of what happened? Oh my gosh. I will be totally honest, and I still struggle with this because, there are days where even just getting out of bed is an impossibility. And those days are fewer. I'm really grateful for that. But when they hit, I feel like it hits harder because, oh, I'm doing so good. I'm doing so good. And then boom, I'm right back to where I was. And so it's, relying on the other people around me. My husband needs to go pick up the kids. I feel like a burden again. After I've worked so hard to not feel like a burden. So yeah, I mean, that voice was and is sucks, right? I really don't like that voice, but at the same time, it does push. Um, Sometimes not in a good way, but sometimes you need that push to just keep going.
I agree with that, especially when you know the person that you want to be or the life that you want to have. And like your ego is just going to sit there and tell you, like, hey, you can sleep, it's fine. Or you don't have to, you can go eat that donut if you want to. It's okay. But you have like that voice of willpower inside too. And yeah, I like that.
Well, and there's a balance, right? Because my body needs the rest. And I'm not going to heal if I'm pushing myself too far. So trying to figure out that balance, that's been a real challenge. So, it becomes, where is that voice being too harsh? When is it okay to say, today I need to rest? Because if I don't rest today, then tomorrow I'm going to have to rest for a week. So, that's where the voice is like, you need to listen, you need to hear it. And then you need to decide, okay, is it true? Or is it going too far?
So do you listen to your intuition a lot?
I like to sleep a lot.
I get it. Me too.
Yeah. So I do listen to my intuition. It doesn't always tell me to sleep, but when it does, I sleep.
That's good. I will catch myself sometimes going to bed at like 6 o'clock at night. Mostly because I'm really, really tired and there's no reason that I need to stay awake right now. And my body is going to like fail me tomorrow if I don't.
Yes. And that's the thing, if you don't listen to your body when it says I need rest, you're just setting yourself up for failure. So then that internal voice gets even more harsh because, well, now you're down, like you said, I'm not going to function the next day. It's such a fine balance. You have to be so careful with it.
It's true. Okay, let's see here. Joy after loss. So it doesn't look the same, but it's still real. What does joy look like for you now? And how do you give yourself permission to have it without guilt?
Okay, so joy for me now, having written these books and going and, doing a reading for these kids and just seeing how excited they are. Like, even if I go back to school for a second time and the kids recognize me and they're like, oh my God, I know you. I'm like, I know. It's so much fun to bring smiles to these little faces and to see their eyes when a lesson connects. So for me, being able to be there and do that, I wouldn't have been able to do that when I had my full-time corporate job. It wasn't even a possibility. And so now I have that opportunity and I get to spend time with these amazing kids who ask like just phenomenal questions. And they're so into like, how did you become an author? Can I be your illustrator? It's like, heck yeah, you can, like, work on it. Send me stuff, I just, there really is so much joy in that. And this is where I go back to, I am grateful for COVID. I'm grateful for my diagnosis. The process sucked. They all like, There's still things that suck about it, but I'm exactly where I need to be. And I will keep repeating that because I believe it. And this is where, if we can't find joy in these moments, where can we find them?
Absolutely. I feel like that should be the quote of the show. Absolutely. Because I mean, every single thing that you do, if you're not looking for the bright side of it, I mean, life gets dark
Really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you don't allow yourself to just continually have that happiness, like you can find yourself on the other side of it.
Yeah.
What are your books about?
Cars.
But like, what's like the storyline of the first one?
So the first one is, I call my characters carlets. So they're young cars, they're carlets. And it's for field day at school. So they have races, and she's the smallest carlet, and she's not the most powerful. She's not the fastest. She's really excited to go out and race until some of the other carlets kind of talk her down. And, they tell her that she's not fast enough, that she's not strong enough. And so the doubt kicks in, and she has to find it in herself to remember her strong point. And that even though she's small, she can take the corners really fast, and she's really good at shifting gears. And so it's about kindness towards yourself, kindness towards others who are not necessarily so kind to you, and being and doing your best. But it's really funny because, here I am, I wrote this book, and I'm, talking about it, and I'm reading to these kids, and all of a sudden it hit me, that kindness to yourself part. Like, oh yeah, I needed to hear that.
I feel like this was just another part of your story, right? Of what you needed to learn.
Yes. These books, this whole journey has been so cathartic. And it really was. It was like all of these lessons that I needed to learn that were gently poking me, and then, they were shoving me, and it's like, okay, I'm showing. Look, I've learned. Look, I've learned these lessons. I'm teaching them to others.
So obviously when you were little, you never really thought that you were going to live this life path.
No, never.
What do you think is next? I mean, I know that you have no like fortune tellers fall in front of you, and you could never actually say the really amazing things that could potentially happen. What do you think is next?
So I'm continuing the series. I just released the third book. I have a fourth book that I'm gonna start working on. After the fourth book, I'm not 100% sure where it will go. But I'm gonna branch out into speaking. So I'm writing these children's books and giving these lessons and messages to these kids. But what I'm finding is, here I am, I'm talking to you. There's adults that need these messages too.
Yeah.
And so if my story can help one person not have to suffer the way that I've suffered, that they're able to see that joy a little easier, that they're able to take that curve with a smile, then why wouldn't I share it?
I think you're absolutely right. And that's exactly like my healing is your healing, right? You tell your story, and hopefully somebody takes a little piece of it and learns from it or applies it to their life.
Well, and that's why when I saw, your podcast, I was like, yes, please.
Well, it's been really lovely to have you here today. If we have one thing that you want to leave our listeners with, what would you like that to be?
I always hesitate at this question because I feel like there is so many things that need to be said, but ugh. um, just remember that you are where you're supposed to be. And even if it sucks in the moment, there are still beautiful things about it. And you're not alone on the journey. There's so many of us who are going through something, even if it's not exactly the same, but something similar. So, reach out, find people who are able and willing to support you. And don't forget to grieve yourself. I think this is all so true. Thank you so much for being here. It's been absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
What I loved most about this conversation is the reminder that life doesn't always reward speed, but it does reward presence. Ryanne's story is a living example that when we stop trying to manhandle life into the shape that we expected, something softer, often even stronger, emerges. The curves don't disappear. The road just changes. And maybe the work isn't getting back to who we were, but allowing ourselves to become who we were meant to be, one corner at a time. So if life has forced you to downshift recently, let this be a reminder that power isn't lost in the slowdown. Sometimes it's finally found there. So until next time, keep showing up, keep growing, and remember, you are never meant to dim your light. Thanks for tuning in and being here, for healing out loud, and for walking this path beside me. If this episode cracked something open or helped you remember a part of yourself, pass it on and share it with someone you love. For more support, free resources, or the next steps to your journey, head over to my website, myhealingisyourhealing.com. And if you loved today's conversation, subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your words help this space grow and help more women find their way home to themselves. If I was your muse today, then my healing is your healing. Until next time.